Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this is our first full review. This is actually the first full thing that I believe I've put together with some, foresight and thought. So, yeah, presentation may be lacking, but I'm sure you'll get over it. So, enjoy. Recently in gaming, we've seen a lot of cinematic experiences, and I'm not saying I didn't enjoy them, because I do. I used to be a bookworm, maybe not so much anymore, but we've had a couple that have come out that have really shined, like Detroit Become Human and a few other that I'm not going to take the time to name here. But here we have now a plague tale, Innocence. A romp through medieval France, but it's actually a rat-infested hellscape and coming-of-age story featuring a noble girl and her freak brother.
Don't worry, I'll stay with Lucas.
Good.
Let's hop right into it. So first, how's the story? You play through as Amicia, a naive girl in 13th century France, as she tries to escape the plague and save her little brother. The story originally starts simple, with you talking with family until the Inquisition knocks on the door and murders the hell out of literally everyone except you. And your freak brother. It quickly sets a tone that this isn't going to be a lighthearted quest, but still manages to have a few moments to alleviate the depression that is this whole experience. And when I say whole experience, I'm talking like a 14-hour mission here. This is a long adventure from start to finish, however, an enjoyable one nonetheless. Along the way, Amicia grows and develops from a sheltered noble girl to a determined young lady trying to save what's left of her family, despite everyone she meets seemingly being hell-bent on either eating her alive or stabbing the hell out of her. She tries to save Hugo, her distant younger brother, from the Inquisition, but not all is as it seems, as the story quickly makes multiple turns, going from a relatively straightforward get to safety to the nearest village and try to survive, to some grand adventure centered around 13th century flawed science that is alchemy. And then it starts to take a really steep turn into over the top towards the end. But it does it very well. I thought that it was totally believable for what's happening. It doesn't start to go in like straight fantasy magic, though, there are a few moments. But they're okay. Despite some odd story beats here and there, it holds up surprisingly well throughout the whole tale. The story isn't overly complicated, and naturally with most fiction, the church is bad. But despite that, it all comes together in a pretty decent fashion. I could believe this being a singular piece, maybe a light novel, definitely not a book. The writing's good, but it's not absolutely fantastic. There are a couple moments during the voice work that I'll get into later. Alrighty, now let's take a look at gameplay. You see, Amicia isn't some massive swallows-hell soldier dude. She's a young girl who can't really do well in an upfront fight, and the game does a damn good job reflecting that. You spend a majority of your time sneaking around with a small sling that you'll upgrade throughout your journey, slinging rocks, and I did mention this before in the story section, alchemy. It's a bigger part of this, central to the story, and it adds a surprising amount of believable depth to the gameplay. You're either sneaking around soldiers or going through puzzle sections featuring massive swarms of plague rats. When I say massive, I do mean massive swarms. The puzzles are simple with increasing complexity towards the end, but still nothing too out there. I felt like I could, I never really got stumped. I had a few moments where things seemed oddly placed, but that's about it. Usually with a bit of common sense, you should be able to figure it out. So very little would I ever need a guide to figure this out. A nice change of pace from all the hiding, though. As I feel like they're more meant to break up those long sections that are just a lot of crouching and a lot of sneaking around, but not a full-blown cutscene. I mentioned earlier that Amicia grows as a character throughout the story, and the gameplay reflects that. As you journey through Hellscape France, she gets more tools and upgrades that allows her style to be a bit more confrontational, at least. You won't be getting into a slugfest anytime soon, but you definitely hold your own, with sleeping gas, rocks that remove helmets, and other tools to distract these soldiers, who, by the way, I noticed are very fucking brain dead. The game doesn't give you a massive amount of room for experimentation either, as the game is extremely linear. Like, when I say linear, I do mean lines all over the place. Exploration may reward you with crafting ingredients, but you always return to the path the game needs you to go on because the plot says you gotta go that way. This could be a negative if it didn't serve the game's purpose so well. This heavy narrative sort of experience with exposition constantly going on even during gameplay, especially during those puzzle segments I noticed, seemed like a great way to take a small break while still elaborating a bit more on the story. It stays very unobstructive while still adding to the experience, so I enjoyed it, and it fleshes out the characters a bit more as well. All in all, the gameplay is passable, but not necessarily key to this experience. You're mostly there for the tale itself. If you wanted something else, you should go play God of War or something. Maybe Devil May Cry, fucking find it.
Here we go.
Alrighty, let's take a look at the sound design. From the crack your sling to the rather well-done voice work, the game absolutely nails things in the sound department. One moment you're in a beautiful cacophony of nature, and the next a massive thunderstorm, which actually added to the gameplay in the moment that it did occur. The voice work is fantastic too, with my only negative being that sometimes the awkward way that two lines come together to make it seem like an argument's going on just doesn't seem to mesh well with most of the dialogue. You can tell that's the look they're trying to go for, but it just doesn't come out in the way that you'd want it to, or that some voice lines seem to clip and start way too soon than they should be, which makes for some awkward pacing during conversations. If you could get past that, it's pretty good. The French accent on all the characters actually added to it for me, but I just enjoy when the accent or the language match the setting. It'd be a bit weird if I was in 13th century France and everyone was speaking German, or, well, they are speaking English, but there's an accent, so it's okay. Feels a little odd to have him speaking perfect English to me, though. Okay, well, this isn't perfect, it's accent. You know what I mean. Even Hugo manages to get his lines done decently well, given how hard child voice acting is. So, I actually thought it was going to be pretty bad whenever he had his moments, but all in all, those are pretty good. The music for the setting is suitably somber given the occurring events. While not exactly stand out, it has a good habit of hitting the right notes during the right moments, and it adds to the experience. You usually got a lot of really long, deep strings during darker segments, while a lot of fluty bullshit usually happens during the outdoor scenes during the fall when everything's, bright, cheerful, when your family isn't getting slaughtered to bits. So, all in all, the sound design, while not totally unique, absolutely nails it with the timing and the way it's handled during the actual scenes of the game. When I listen to it in my free time, no. Does it hit the nail on the head usually? Yes, it does. Let's move on to a graphical presentation. And when I say presentation, I do say presentation because it feels like one. The game is impressive, especially during its outdoor scenes. It was absolutely phenomenal, with the plague rats piling and swarming over each other to chew you a new one, to Amicia getting some new duds every once in a while. Presentation is fantastic. My only gripes would have to be the lip syncing, never really hitting it. It's always slightly off, even when it gets close, and certain characters' face look a little blobby at times. You'll know it when you see it, but it definitely took a little bit away from it, but usually I was too focused on the dialogue itself to actually really notice. But, yeah, those blobby characters, it was like the game still had yet to load in some finer details, but overall I could ignore that given the presentation on the outdoor scenes. Aside from that, the lighting engine is some of the most impressive we've seen to date. With fire and light so integral to the gameplay, it looks fantastic. Most of it being that you're constantly moving around because it's linked to the gameplay with the torch in hand, and like real-time shadows constantly working it, and the fire doesn't constantly feel like it's blasting in my ears, like it's not deafening, but they absolutely nailed it with that. The environments are also top-notch, from a mysterious keep in a thunderstorm all the way to a simple woodland scene in fall colors, which, by the way, during, I believe it's the 3rd chapter, it's probably some of the most beautiful graphic work that I've ever seen. It really nails the aesthetic for the area, very rustic feeling. Despite things getting dreary during some segments, they fit the tone of the scene, so I can't really complain. When I do say dreary, I mean these scenes go on sometimes for, like a 1 hour, 30-minute chapter of just nothing but gray, but given the tone, I'm willing to give it a free pass. Now, time for the overall score. This is definitely a narrative experience, but it's a damn good one that gets you invested a few hours in. It's a bit slow on the startup with a few answers until the end, but they do keep you hooked, constantly throwing out new storylines for you to attach onto, and eventually taking a totally different direction than I thought it would. The gameplay isn't super gripping, but it had a few moments where I had a lot of fun with it as well, instead of it just being an excuse to push forward in the story. It comes together to bring about a damn good time, albeit one with very little replay value unless you like collectibles. And when I say very little replay value, I mean there's a second HUD setting called Immersion, I believe. It takes away all HUD elements. It doesn't really... I felt like it didn't really add to the experience unless you want to feel like you're watching a movie. You already are, but I felt like it only made the game a bit more draggy. But overall, 14 hours, and unless you want to hear the whole story again with 0 changes, there's not really a reason to go back to the game. I'll give it an 82 out of 100 on the scale. Absolutely, the trash can's empty, it's all good, it's nice and clean. I'd give it a purchase, or maybe wait for a sale if this isn't really your thing, but you're kind of curious. But it's definitely one of the higher quality titles I've enjoyed out there. I like the setting, so I'm a bit biased, but I'd recommend this. I believe I said this before, I enjoy story experiences, and this one was definitely up there. I don't regret purchasing it. Maybe I should have waited for a sale, but that's for you to decide with how likely you're invested in this. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Overall, I enjoyed doing this review. I'm actually looking forward to doing some more in the future. After this, I believe I'm going to do Gravity Rush Remastered. I'm really looking forward to doing that, because I absolutely love the game, and I'd like to get more in depth as to why I enjoyed the game. But overall, I think I'm going to do a few more of these. They're actually quite fun, and a good way to give, I would say objective, but a heavily biased review from yours truly. And the style so far has been a bit casual, so I'm not sure if you guys will dig it, and if you don't, well, I'm sure you'll get over it. But this is the style I think I'm going to try and stick with. This might have come off as a bit canned or a bit stiff. I'm sorry, it's my first time doing a recording that isn't live, so it's going to take me a bit to get used to doing this sort of thing. But we're starting to get the hang of it down, so I have a feeling it's going to take, less than 3 weeks to actually crank one of these out. Say it like it's on a production scale, but we are putting effort into this, believe it or not. So, we'll keep doing our best shot. Look forward to a Gravity Rush Remastered review. I would say subscribe. Well, yeah, obligatory like, subscribe, wank it. I don't fucking care. We'll see you next time, folks. Thanks for swinging by.